For my thoughts on all the latest happenings in the NFL in a completely relaxed, unscripted format, be sure to check out my channel, JG9 News. And now, on with our feature presentation. I don't know what it was with the Kansas City Chiefs in the Marv Levy era, but for whatever reason, this team was absolutely cursed with not just injuries, but the strangest injuries possible. It's one thing for a team to get constantly injured. It's another thing for a team to get constantly injured in a way that resembles how Mr. Burns lost his all-star baseball team in the Simpsons episode Homer at the Bat. In 1980, I made a video about this man right here, wide receiver Stan Rome and starting right tackle Charlie Getty, because prior to a game against the San Diego Chargers that year, the two men were literally just warming up and stretching on the field, as everyone does before a game. And in a freak accident, both men were lost for the entire season, as the Chiefs somehow managed to lose their wide receiver and their right tackle 1 hour before kickoff, in a bizarre incident that you can learn more about by clicking the card in the upper right corner. Those injuries were a bad sign of things to come for the Chiefs, as they faltered and missed the playoffs, because of course they did, seeing as this was part of that 20 or so year stretch where you actually felt bad for Chiefs fans that they have since more than made up for. But in 1980, that was a thing that happened. And I have tons of other stories like that where I take a deep dive into the weird and wacky history of the NFL that you might not know about. So if you like that sort of stuff, be sure to hit that like button down below, subscribe, and turn on that notification bell so you don't miss a single video that we post on the channel. We are so close to hitting 60,000 subscribers, and we're trying to build the best football community on the platform to talk all things NFL history all the time. So thanks in advance for your support. But what's crazy is that the incident I mentioned from 1980, somehow, that wasn't the craziest injury of the Marv Levy era Chiefs. Because 2 years before, something happened involving this man right here that seems almost too insane to believe. This player right here is Kansas City Chiefs running back Ted McKnight. And in 1978, as the starting running back of the team, the Chiefs lost him for an extended period of time. They didn't lose him because he got hurt during a game or got hurt during practice. They didn't lose him because he got suspended. They didn't lose him because he got injured during a workout. They lost him because he got injured, of all places, at a car wash. Seriously, haven't heard that one before, where a player gets injured at the freaking car wash, but we're taking a deep dive into that story today, nearly half a century later. Because this is the story behind one of the craziest injuries in the over 60-year history of the Kansas City Chiefs franchise, and how they lost their starting running back at the car wash. Before I talk about the actual incident in question, and how a man gets injured for an extended period of time at the car wash of all places, we need some context to understand just who this man right here, Ted McKnight, was, and why not only the Chiefs needed him badly, but why McKnight needed to be out there so badly. This man is Ted McKnight, and he actually got his start 1 year before this in 1977 with the Oakland Raiders, after being drafted there in the second round. The bad news for McKnight, however, was that despite being a second-round pick, he never played a single snap in Oakland in the regular season. It just wasn't the best fit there. McKnight was a super raw running back who did not play Division I football, instead playing at Division II Minnesota Duluth, and having his position switch from the defensive side of the ball at linebacker to running back. We'll talk more about that in just a bit, but McKnight was asked to join an already stacked team, and he didn't really know what to expect, saying that playing for the defending champions was more and less than what he expected, saying, "It's been more in the sense that as a running back, I'm doing a lot more than I thought I would, carrying the ball, running, and blocking. But it's less in the amount of time I have to do what I'm doing. Instead of having 6, 7, or 8 plays, maybe I'll have 1, 2, or 3 plays to learn it." He was super raw and wasn't ready. It was a whole different ballgame for him, and he got cut by the Raiders before being picked up by the Kansas City Chiefs. The Raiders had a great draft class in 1977, with guys like Mickey Marvin, the guard who played 11 seasons with the team, Jeff Barnes, the linebacker who played 11 seasons with the team, Ron Martin, a great defender who should have won MVP of Super Bowl 15, and Lester Hayes, the 5-time Pro Bowl defensive back who should be in the Pro Football Hall of Fame. This pick, however, was the only real blemish. McKnight didn't do a whole lot in Kansas City in 1977 when he joined the team, which is to be expected somewhat, as he only touched the ball 12 times on an absolutely terrible team that went 2-12. And you can learn a bit more about the 1977 Chiefs and one of their only 2 wins of the year by clicking the card in the upper right corner. However, now, it was 1978, and it was a brand new year with a brand new regime in charge. Out was Paul Wiggin and Tom Bettis, and in was Marv Levy, who decided that this 1978 Chiefs team was going to have an extreme emphasis on running the ball, basically taking it back to the days of the 1930s and the 1940s with the wing T formation. If you wanted to know if an NFL team could win playing an Army or Navy style offense, the Chiefs under Marv Levy were the closest thing to that. McKnight knew that he had to prove himself, and he was doing everything right. Under the collective bargaining agreement, no veteran had to report to training camp until July 21st. You could if you wanted to, but you didn't have to. It was completely optional. Only one veteran reported to camp before July 21st. That player for the Chiefs? You guessed it, Ted McKnight, who said, "I want the coaches to know I'm serious about playing this year, and that I want to play ball. I came out for my benefit. I was anxious to get here and start learning. I feel kind of like a rookie myself. I was only with the Raiders in the preseason and didn't get here until late last year. I went through a lot, and I wanted to get started right this time." In other words, he knew he was fighting for his career, and he was going to make sure that it wouldn't come to a premature end. And after an impressive start to camp, and an impressive first preseason game where, in a 17-14 victory over the Green Bay Packers, McKnight scored a rushing touchdown and led the team with 62 rushing yards on 11 carries, things were looking very good for McKnight, especially because if any team needed running backs, considering the offense that they ran, it was Kansas City. And now, it was time for the biggest game of Ted McKnight's career, a preseason game against the Minnesota Vikings. You might think this is an over-exaggeration, but it's not for 2 reasons. Number 1, again, McKnight was still fighting for a roster spot. He didn't do anything on the ground in 1977, especially with a new regime this year, to guarantee a roster spot in 1978. And he remembered what happened with the Raiders in 1977, where he thought he was all right in the preseason, but he happened to lose the numbers game. But number 2, McKnight is a Minnesota man. This was a chance for his friends and family to see him on TV, because they weren't going to get too many chances otherwise, since Chiefs games didn't get shown in Minnesota for obvious reasons. Said McKnight quite simply, "I want to have a good game on TV for our friends back in Minnesota." McKnight was born in Duluth, Minnesota. He went to high school in Minnesota. He went to college at Minnesota Duluth, where he became the most accomplished running back in school history. Prior to joining the NFL, this man had lived his whole life in Minnesota. So even though this game was in Kansas City, because everyone could watch on TV, this felt like a homecoming of sorts. McKnight even said later on that this was the game he looked forward to the most the entire 1978 season. And this was especially true because McKnight was a theater major, and while in college, he even performed in front of the Vikings at one point during their training camp. Everything seems to be going great for this man right here, Ted McKnight, as he was getting ready for the biggest moment of his career. That is, until it wasn't. Because literally the day of the game, the Chiefs lost McKnight with a serious injury. McKnight was about to head over to Arrowhead Stadium to play in that preseason game against the Vikings, which the Chiefs won by a final score of 17-13. As you're about to find out, he contributed absolutely nothing in that game. Before he was going to head over, he decided to do what just about every American has done at some point. He went to the car wash. He wasn't alone in going to the car wash. He was going with his teammate, Horace Belton, who also played running back. The plan was for Belton, in his car, to get his car washed, and then the two men would head over to the game. This was a self-service car wash, for what it's worth, so you had to do everything yourself. And from everything I could find online, this car wash, Liberty Car Wash, is no longer around. Anyways, from all accounts, here's what we can deduce happened. Belton was the driver, and McKnight was just along for the ride. One of the doors on the passenger side of the car was open, so McKnight got out of the car to try and close it. As McKnight was going around the car, walking around the back of the car to get to the passenger side to close that door, for whatever reason, Belton decided to back up the car. I don't know why he did this, considering the fact that he had to see that McKnight wasn't in the car. Maybe Belton meant to drive and put it in the wrong thing. Or maybe he backed up because he didn't realize that McKnight was walking around that way. Or maybe Belton didn't realize that the car was moving at all and thought that he had it in park. But in reality, it was in reverse. But for whatever reason, Belton backed up the car and not only ended up hitting McKnight, but ended up pinning him against a concrete wall at the car wash. This was a case of friendly fire at a car wash of all places. And now, McKnight was seriously injured. And I don't mean that he got a minor bump. I mean that he had to be taken to the hospital because he was pinned against the wall with the car, because he suffered deep contusions in his left thigh and had a blood clot bruise, losing a ton of blood. This meant that, despite expecting to play in the Viking game that Saturday night, he was spending it in the hospital, wailing in pain. Said McKnight, "I'm right down on the bottom. I would need a ladder just to get up to the curb right now. It hurts, and in more ways than one. It was just such a freak thing. I can't really believe this has happened to me." He then added, "As soon as I got knocked up against the wall, I felt as though the whole world was coming crashing down on me. All I could think about was all the hard work and effort that I had made was now all wasted. But what especially hurts is that we were playing Minnesota. This was especially meaningful to me. I know it was only a preseason game, but that didn't make any difference. There was no game this season that I was looking forward to more than this one. I had said a lot of things about how I wanted to do well against Minnesota, and now I can't back any of it up. It comes down to a lot of pride." Speaking on the pain, he said, "I tried to walk to the bathroom, and I could hardly make it. It hurt. I wish I could believe things will be better, but it just seems like everything has gone down the drain now. I just can't imagine anything like this happening. I hope I can keep it together and come back. It's just not fair. I had worked so hard and come so far. I had worked too hard for something like this to happen. It's just not fair." You could absolutely feel the hurt in McKnight's voice with that response. Here was a man who knew that this was his last real chance to make it in the NFL, and it was coming to an end for the moment because he got backed into a concrete wall by his own teammate at the car wash. And as a result, McKnight had to miss a month's worth of action. He was in line to be the starting running back on the team. He came to camp early because he wanted as many reps and opportunities as possible since he joined the Chiefs late in 1977. He wanted to impress the coaching staff. And now, that was all for nothing. Now, the good news for McKnight was that despite being sidelined for a month as a result of this brutal and freak injury, his career was not over. Not in the slightest bit. Because when McKnight did come back, he bounced back stronger than ever, as you can probably tell from the highlights you've been watching. In 1978, McKnight had 627 rushing yards and 6 rushing touchdowns, finishing second on the team in both of those categories. And to say that he was extremely efficient in Marv Levy's offense would be putting it lightly, as he averaged a whopping 6 yards per carry. This led the entire NFL among players with at least 100 rushing attempts, and was the first time that any qualified player in NFL history ran for 6 yards a carry in a season since Mercury Morris did this for the Miami Dolphins in 1973. In fact, the 6 yards per carry that McKnight averaged in 1978 made him the first qualified player in Chiefs history to accomplish this feat, and was the all-time record in franchise history for yards per carry in a single season, until Jamal Charles averaged 6.4 yards per carry in 2010 as he helped guide the Chiefs to the playoffs. That record of McKnight's in franchise history stood for more than 3 decades. The injury was obviously awful and devastating, but at least it did not end up slowing McKnight down once he eventually bounced back and got on the field. And Ted McKnight actually had a very solid career in the NFL for this team behind me right here, the Kansas City Chiefs. In 1979, he led the team in most major categories: rushing yards, total touchdowns, and yards from scrimmage. And in 1980, he followed it up with over 1,000 yards from scrimmage for the first and only time in his career. McKnight would play one more season with the Chiefs in 1981 before ending his career in 1982 as a member of the Buffalo Bills. When all was said and done, Ted McKnight finished his NFL career with over 3,000 yards from scrimmage and 23 total touchdowns, which is not too shabby considering everything that he had to go through in his career, from his early release by the Raiders to the whole incident at the car wash in 1978. Today, from all accounts that I could find, McKnight seems to be absolutely crushing it in the finance world, which is awesome. So he's had a nice life for himself, especially considering the fact that he was at rock bottom following that car wash catastrophe. Ted McKnight was a really fun player to watch. He was a bright spot on some really bad Chiefs teams, as every time he touched the ball, even if it was for a brief moment in time, you knew he could make something special happen, as he was so quick and so slippery. But in his entire career in the regular season, unfortunately, he never got a chance to play the Vikings. In a competitive game, a regular season game, he never got a chance to play against his hometown team. And even though that Viking game in 1978 was a preseason game, McKnight didn't get a chance to play in it due to what happened at Liberty Car Wash. I don't know what the moral of the story is here, whether it's to make sure your car isn't in reverse, whether it's to always park your car if you're not intending to move, or whether it's to just not get your car washed, or if you're going to use the machines. But whatever lesson you want to take away from this, it was too late on this day to save Ted McKnight. Because on this day in 1978, I think it's safe to say that when it came to his time at the car wash, it was not McKnight's night. Get your official Jaguar Gator 9 merchandise by going to jj9shop.com, and be sure to like and subscribe, as it really helps the channel out a lot. Join me every Wednesday night where we'll play NFL Trivia for cash prizes at 9 p.m. Eastern over on Twitch. To learn more about the history of college football, subscribe to Jaguar Gator 8. To learn more about the history of Major League Baseball, subscribe to Jaguar Gator 7. Also, special thanks to all of our Patreon supporters for helping out the channel. Your support is greatly appreciated. See how you can become a patron and request future video topics in the description below.